All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for making the time to join. George and I are really excited to show you what we've got today on Solargraf. Major improvements have been made to the tool um, this year. So I'll just give it another minute just to give a chance for more people to join, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we've got about 20 people, which is great. Just give it one more minute until more people join. So just to give you guys an overview of what the webinar is about today. The webinar is mainly focused to show you guys the new improvements we've made to the design tool. So those improvements would help installers get more accurate proposals out and estimates to customers, where you can guarantee production estimates that are generated from the systems. And that would include modeling a PV system and a battery design as well. So what I'll do is I'll start off with a few slides just to give you an overview of the platform. For those of you who haven't seen Solargraf before, this would be a good intro just to give you an idea of what George is going to show us visually today. And also for people who've used Solargraf previously, who are current customers, you'll be able to see the improvements that have been done on the new design tool. All right, so let me go ahead for the sake of time. I'll go ahead and get started. We're 1 minute past the clock. So if everybody can see my screen, great. So let me go ahead and start. All right. For those of you who haven't seen Solargraf before, so we market ourselves as a one-stop shop for all your solar needs. A solar installer can log into Solargraf today, create a design, plug in an address, create a design from scratch, generate a customized proposal, tailor and customize all different types of modules, materials, inverters that you guys use, and also include a battery design with a proposal. The end goal is to get customized proposal out in the hands of a homeowner. And because it's all web-based, you'll be able to discuss changes and make changes to the proposal by simply sitting on a kitchen table with a homeowner. Supporting the contract signature part, so we are integrated with DocuSign. We have a few financing partners that we work with. In addition, we allow you to model any type of financing programs that you currently use today. All the tariffs, we use Genability. All tariffs are built in. We have access to a large database of ASJs. And then two other services we offer in the essence where you don't want your sales reps to do proposals. We do offer that service in the platform. And that includes sizing systems, sizing batteries, or doing a simple max fit design. We have very competitive turnaround times, and we support different types of layout installations, such as ground mounts and new constructions. The other part, which we are growing a large database for, and we currently cover more than 50 states, is the permit designs. So we do permit designs for PV, storage, EVs, and we have competitive turnaround time anywhere between 24 to 48 hours. Also, one of the other features that we're working on that should be live somewhere around Q1 is generating an SLD file once you complete a solar design on Solargraf. And these are some main points about the new design tool. So today we allow you to detect obstructions, pitch, azimuth, LiDAR assisted 3D modeling, and very soon we will have the auto roof detection that automatically detects all the roof lines for you. So George is going to slightly cover that in today's demo, but this is kind of where we stand today with our new design tool. Just a quick summary of where we are, our kind of customers, where we're going with Solargraf. So to date, there are over 2 million proposals that have been created using the Solargraf platform. We've done over 1 million permits for our installers. There is more than 7,000 users today using Solargraf from different companies. And we've also expanded to other countries. So we're currently live in 5 different countries, and we support 5 different languages. Really quick on the last slide, just wanted to cover this feature. So API is super important. It's been demanded by almost everybody we work with, all our partners. So today this is live. We integrate with different CRM systems, and that basically helps transmit data from different endpoints, such as project details, financing, pricing options. All that can be dumped into your CRM from Solargraf once the project's been completed. All right, now I want to get into the fun stuff. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, George. I just want to remind you there's a chat box um, where you can post your questions. We will have a Q&A session once George is done with his demo, and we'll be able to answer all your questions. You will get a recording of the webinar after the demo, after the session. And also you'll get a link where you're going to be able to register and meet with an agent directly to basically do a custom walkthrough of Solargraf and address your requirements. So George, whenever you're ready, I'll let you kick it off, mate.
Thanks, Asham, and thank you everyone for being here today. Really appreciate it. So I'm just going to share my screen. Might take a moment or two to pop up. You should be seeing a projects page in Solargraf. So yeah, I'll try and do the demo for the benefit of those that have never seen Solargraf. So if you've got a few current Solargraf users on the line, apologies if some of this is old news. I've got our projects page here open. This is typically where you'd kind of start the process of creating a new project, or at least look to find a project that you want to continue working on. So it all begins with this new project button up in the top right. And whenever we create a project in Solargraf, the first thing we'll need to know is the address. So just type that in. It should work anywhere in the world, anywhere that Google can find that address. If you are creating this project from your CRM, you can actually bring some customer data over with you. So things like their name and contact details. If you're creating the project directly through the Solargraf application like I am today, you can type that information in now, or you'll have an opportunity later to add that as required. So just take a moment to ensure that this white pin has landed on the correct roof. Sometimes if it's a fairly rural property or a large property, it may be that pin drops out in the backyard or the front yard. So if you need to reposition that, just click to kind of reposition that pin. And once you're happy with that, you hit next, and we'll move on to what we call the pre-design page. So there's just a few details that we want to establish before we actually get to creating a design. Again, most of this can be changed later during the flow, but I just want to highlight these things to you now. So firstly, if it's residential or commercial, that's going to have an impact on things like utility tariffs and incentives that are available. So just double check that. You can either create the design or you can order the proposal. If you're ordering a proposal, you'll still have to complete a lot of what's on this first page, but you'll basically just hand it over to Enphase or the Solargraf team, and one of our colleagues will create that design to your criteria, and you'll be notified when that is returned to you, usually around 24 business hours. So you do have that option up here. If you're going to create the design yourself, which is what we'll do today, you have the option to choose how you want to create that. We do support 2D or 3D designs, and we can also create designs that are specific to a battery system that's being added to existing PV. So obviously the topic of today is a 3D design, so we'll stick with that for now. And then really two other things that we need to be sure of before we get into the design tool. So we just want to double check the imagery to start with. As you'll see, we're using Nearmap as our primary provider. They will provide you a full history of all the captures that they've made at that site. Usually the most recent one is going to be best, but if ever you have an issue with this image, maybe it's blurry or it's taken at a funny angle and we can see the vertical walls, you can switch that out for an older image. 99% of the time, you can just pretty much skip over this. That image will usually be sufficient. Just note as well, if you're doing anything like a new construction project, or if you're operating in an area where we don't have any Nearmap imagery, I think they cover about 85% of the US population. But if you're in a really rural area, you do have the option to upload your own image. So that could be a drone image that you've taken or a blueprint of the building if it hasn't been constructed yet. Just note when you're uploading your own image, you will need to scale that image. So you need to provide the length of an eave or a ridge, just so we know the distance between 2 pixels on the screen when you're in the design tool. So again, very little for you to do most of the time here, but just do double check that image. And then the only other thing we want to look at is energy consumption, current consumption. So you'll have the utility and tariff selected for you. If the customer is going to move to a new tariff after the installation, you can select that here, and we'll model future interactions with the grid according to that new tariff. And then we just want to get an idea of their consumption. So there's multiple ways you can do this. If you've got bills in hand, you can enter the start and end date and the specific usage for that period. Otherwise, you can estimate it with, average monthly bills, or, we'll just put an annual value for today. Do note you can enter dollars if you only have that instead of usage in kilowatt hours. Obviously, if you're entering dollars, we'll just reverse engineer what the kilowatt hours should be using this tariff up here. So I'll stick with annual usage, and I'm just going to say that this person or this home consumes 12,000 kilowatt hours per year. And again, we can come back and tweak this later. If we're not particularly familiar with the customer yet, we just want to get them a provisional quote. Start with whatever information you have. And as you get to know that person, you can always come back and adjust, this to be more precise. Now, where you're entering, an annual average or a monthly average, or you're only entering maybe one part of the year, we will create a projection for any missing data, or we will distribute that one annual value across each month of the year. And you see that happening here. So that's just looking at, typical consumption patterns for other homes on that tariff. Here we've entered just one single annual value, so it's just distributing that. And obviously it's weighting more of that consumption during the summer months, when consumption will be higher in this part of Florida. The last thing you can do as well is just define a consumption profile. So there's a kind of standard list here. You can create your own if you want. Let's just say it's a household with school kids. And what that helps us to do is to distribute any given day's consumption throughout each hour of the day. So you'll be familiar with the kind of morning and evening peak graph that we see here. And that's especially important for places like NEM 3.0. Out in California, I do have a separate project that we'll look at in a second for that case. But it is quite important to have a pretty good idea of what time of day the majority of the consumption is occurring. So quick summary, as I say, just enter your address, make sure you're happy with your image, provide whatever consumption information you can, and then hit the Create Design button down in the bottom right. So that will open up the design tool. And at this point, the project in Solargraf is created. So a project for us is really just kind of a quote for a customer, at least to begin with. And you'll land here in the roof design tab. So today's demo, I'm really going to focus on roof design, solar design, and battery design. This electrical design will be for another day. That's not strictly widely available at the moment. So in roof design, we're going to start in the 2D world. What we're going to do, guys, is basically just create an outline of the roof in 2D. And then we're going to convert that into a 3D model, and then we can move to solar design and start placing modules and so on. So I've got this pen tool selected, and this allows me to draw the roof facets. So I'm going to show you how this is done today by the majority of users. And then I'm going to show you something that's currently in beta testing, but is going to serve as a very handy shortcut for this process. So just so we're all on the same page, when you're tracing the roof, always make sure you do the perimeter first, like I have done here. You start in any corner at the perimeter, go around the outside, and then just connect that to where you started. So now you have one facet drawn out. And then from there, you can divide the facets. So we're just starting and ending at any existing point. I can come along these rakes, bring that down to here. We've got our little hip. And really you're just kind of connecting the dots at this point. So there's no right or wrong order in terms of how you do this. You just want to make sure that every edge of the roof is traced over. Basically every facet of the roof has been divided. So you'll see me now, that's completed. If I quickly just clear all, and again, I'll just show you kind of where we're going with this. On that pen tool, you'll see, certain people would see an option to detect the roof outline. And that's just a one-click solution that basically will output, the roof. So there may be, small corrections that need to be made, like so, hence why that's still in beta. So I'll just kind of tidy that one up a little bit. Obviously, we can use that pen tool to correct things. But as I say, most users today are tracing it by hand, and then we do have that roof detection still in beta at present. So either way you achieve this roof outline, your next step is always going to be to run what we call the wizard. And the wizard is essentially a series of algorithms that will take that 2D outline of the roof and convert it into a 3D model. So specifically what that's going to do is find the pitch and azimuth of all the facets we've drawn. And it's going to find any internal walls. You see those denoted in purple. So that's where we have kind of a separation of stories within the roof line itself. It's going to look for any obstructions. You can see those pop up. It's going to look for any trees as well. So it's doing quite a few things for us there with that single click. And that moves us now into this 3D world. So from there, we can rotate the camera and you can just kind of verify that your 3D models come out correct. So I'm actually seeing a little issue out the back here. I'm going to jump back to 2D and I'm just going to move that azimuth, that yellow line to the eave where it should be. And then from there, I'll just re-hit 3D and that will generate a 3D model for us. So at this stage, you've got your kind of first provisional 3D model. It is a good idea to verify that that's come out correctly. I sort of caught that issue out the back there, but we do have the split screen. And that will essentially allow us to see this home in 3D using Google's 3D imagery. So you've got a side-by-side view here. And really all we're trying to do is just basically compare our model on the right-hand side with what we see in Google. So you can rotate that by 90 degrees, and we can obviously spin this one round as well. And like I say, we're really just making sure, have we got all the facets of the roof modeled? Do we have any extra facets that shouldn't be there? And have we made sure that, the azimuth is correct, that each facet has kind of been modeled to face in the correct direction? So I've given that a quick 360. I'm happy that my model looks good. If there's any doubts on that, guys, you've got the street view option up here. In certain areas, looks like it's not supported there, or you can open up that property in Google Maps on their website. Because we're using their imagery inside Solargraf, we're limited to 90 degrees of rotation. But if you open up that on their website, it'll actually have a full 360 degrees there. So sometimes it's a bit easier if you want a more kind of custom camera perspective. Anyway, so that's, as I say, the idea is really just to verify the 3D model. And at that point, you're finished with the roof design. So we can move over into solar design. And here's where we're going to start placing panels. So there's a couple of different ways you can approach this, guys. Some people, let's say if you're not quite as experienced with these 3D design tools or you're fairly new to the solar industry, you may want to start by running the shading wizard. And what that does is essentially simulates the sun passing over this home and assesses the shade. So shade is comprised of two things. It's the solar access value, which is how much sun that could hit that part of the roof actually does, owing to things like trees and obstructions or neighboring roof facets. So that's expressed as a percentage. And then the other component is what we call the tilt and orientation factor. And that basically describes, again, as a percentage, how far is that roof facet from the optimal conditions for solar production. So in the Northern Hemisphere, the south-facing roofs are going to produce more than north-facing roofs. And similarly, the tilt of the roof, the pitch of that facet will determine how much you produce. So ideally, you want the pitch to be equal to the longitude of the location. Obviously, that's very rarely the case. So these two things are combined to give us what we call the total solar resource fraction, which is basically 1%. You just multiply the first two together. That really tells you, from ideal conditions, how much does this particular part of this roof vary. So obviously, if it's 100% TSRF, it means it's perfectly south-facing. It's got the perfect tilt based on the longitude, how far away it is from the equator, and it's got no shading from anything like trees or obstructions. It's very difficult to achieve 100% TSRF. So you'll see this heat map appear on the model. And that heat map basically represents the TSRF but annualized. So we're calculating that for every hour of the year, for every pixel on the roof. And then those values are annualized as an average, and you see them represented by the colors here. So this bright yellow or close to white here, this is very high TSRF. You see a 97%. If you check these values over here, you can see a little bit of shading probably from this tree. TSRF is perfect. TOF is perfect. So this is a really good place to put solar, but obviously it's a relatively small facet. Over on the eastern side, again, very high SAV. We're not really seeing much shade at all during the year. Tilt and orientation isn't quite as good because it's east facing, but it's still a relatively good place to put solar. And over on the west here, tilt and orientation is a little bit lower. SAV is still pretty good. And obviously, if we get close to those obstructions, you'll probably see the SAV drop down a little bit. So as I say, a lot of people don't need to run that shading wizard to start with. You can probably look at the roof and see where the best place would be to put the modules. But if there's any doubts, obviously some roofs are much more complex than this, it is good practice just to run that shading wizard just to get started. And as I say, you can hover over the roof and you can see those values change. Now, another thing that you may or may not need to do, and this depends really on how you configure your account, is to apply the setbacks. So over here, we have the fire setbacks icon. You can select that and open a menu. And most installers that we work with will use what we call the address-based list, which is essentially a database of AHJ records maintained by Solargraf. So I think, as Hisham mentioned earlier, we do have a permits service. We offer permits, and the same team that actually deliver those permit sets are the people that are maintaining this list for us. So we have a very high degree of confidence in the accuracy of these AHJ records because they're being monitored constantly. And that address-based list will usually return you a city level record, which is very specific to the location. If we don't have one of those, it will offer you a county level record, which is kind of a bit more of a conservative AHJ record, should satisfy all the cities in the county. And in theory, if we don't have a county level record, we could offer you a state level record, although I've never seen us not have either the city or the county. So obviously you're going to pick the one that's the most geographically specific, which is going to be the city of Wellington in this example. And we'll actually display what those setbacks are. So you can see that it will vary at the ridge based on how much of the roof surface is covered by PV. Now you can, if you want, build out your own list of setbacks. We don't see this very often, but sometimes I'll have people that are administering the Solargraf account who want to bake in some additional, let's say, padding around obstructions or something like that. So it's not generally recommended, but again, you have the flexibility to create your own setbacks records if you want. So I've configured my account to just apply that automatically. So you can actually see as soon as we generated that 3D model, we've got those ridge setbacks. You can see the gray area. That's the area that we'll avoid when we place modules. Now, you can always select a roof edge and change the setback on either side, although that can also be controlled by a permission. So if you've got certain users, let's say they're designers, there may be certain exceptions to the setbacks that they are aware of that they want to kind of override. You can give them that permission. Whereas your initial sales reps who are usually creating the first design, you may not want to give them that permission. You may enforce that they follow the setbacks as prescribed in Solargraf. So a lot of flexibility there in terms of different users and what they're allowed to do, if you like. So for a lot of people, if you're not going to start with the shading wizard and your setbacks are kind of configured to be applied automatically, the first thing you'll want to do is add panels in the Solar Design tab. So we click that, and we can just select a roof facet. I'm going to go over here on this eastern side because we've got pretty high TSRF and it's quite large, and that's going to open a menu. And from there, you can confirm which panel or module you want to use. You can obviously control exactly which modules appear in this list from your settings. Ditto the inverter, and then you can choose your orientation. I'll stick with portrait for now. We have some advanced settings, things like spacing and a minimum SAV if you want to avoid areas with heavy shading. I'll leave that off for now. And the last thing you want to choose is how you actually want to put those modules on the roof. So if you leave it with the auto mode selected, you just click once on that facet and it will basically max fit just that one facet. So it's going to use this module, it's going to keep everything in portrait. And you'll see up here, we've got 43 modules on there. Now, that may be too many. So I'm going to use this select tool, which is basically your kind of your home base in the 3D design tool. This is how you select existing objects like a panel or a tree or whatever. I'm going to select that array, hit delete on my keyboard, and I'm going to go back to add panels in the manual mode. So the manual mode is really just kind of a click and drag motion. You create a region on that facet where you want to populate the modules, just like so. And obviously just release that to place the modules. You can also do the single mode as well, which is just kind of, click one by one to place the modules. That's typically going to be used for people that want to combine portrait and landscape. So it doesn't really apply on this roof. But if I just move these modules down a little bit like so, maybe we wanted to fit, an extra row of modules up here near the ridge, but we can't because they're in portrait. So in that case, I could hit that panel tool, I'll change it to landscape. And then from there, I can probably slide, one row of landscape modules on there. So once you have the modules on the roof, again, use that select tool to select the array. From there, you can change things like the orientation or the module that's used. You can also see these blue circles around the perimeter of the array. So those can be used to sort of resize the array to add or remove modules. And you can also just pick that up and move it around as you go. So you'll notice, I don't know how well you'll see it on the screen share, guys, but as I move that array, I've picked it up, I'm moving it towards a setback, you'll see the top row of modules turns red. So if I let go, it's just going to delete those modules. It's basically saying I don't want you to put the modules on the setback. Similarly, if I pick this up and try and drop those towards the eave, again, it's going to remove the modules that landed on the obstruction. So Solargraf's really good at protecting users, I would say, certainly sales reps, from placing modules in a place where they couldn't actually be installed. Some tools that you'll see, they'll let you put modules kind of anywhere, maybe on a tree or neighbor's home or something like that, and then they might tell you later. But with Solargraf, as I say, every time you put modules on the roof, you can be sure that they could actually be installed there, provided that everything done in roof design is correct, of course. So once you've got a provisional layout, you can see this calculate button will hit that. So that's going to do two things. It's firstly going to run shading on the panels. And the reason why we do the shading on the panels is because when we initially do it on the roof, we're really just trying to get that heat map. We're trying to work out where the modules should go. So we're doing it at a relatively low density because we don't want you to sit there for 3 minutes watching it spin. It's quite a large surface area to calculate that on. When we do it on the modules, however, we want to be far more accurate. So we're doing it at a higher density. And we can do that because the modules are generally a much smaller surface area than the entire roof. So we can do it at a higher density, but because it's a smaller surface area, we're not adding significant delays. So that's why you'll see there's a distinction between roof shading and panel shading. Anyway, so we've got the panel shading. If we come into this visibility menu where this eye icon is in the top right, we can actually view that heat map if we want. It won't show by default, but you can show or hide the roof and panel heat maps. Let's just leave that roof one on for now. And you'll also have a production value. So I'd estimated that this home is consuming about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month. I've designed a 6.4 kilowatt system that's going to achieve 9,197 kilowatt hours in year one, which is a 76% consumption offset. So in general, you'd probably want to try and size your PV system to achieve between 100 and let's say 110% consumption offset. It does depend obviously on the utility and the homeowner, but in general, that's kind of what we see people aim for. So I'm just going to kind of resize that array. I'm going to add a few more modules and I'll recalculate. So obviously that production value, which is, year one estimated, translates into consumption offset. So that's just production divided by consumption. We're at 105% consumption offset. And that also translates into a utility bill offset. So even if we're producing more than we're consuming over 12 full months, that doesn't mean we won't have a utility bill. It depends on when the consumption's occurring, when the production's occurring. Often there'll be a minimum connection fee, which you basically can't get away with or can't get away from. So achieving a utility bill offset above 90% is generally pretty hard. But again, that depends a lot on the utilities that you're working with. So as you can see, there's a little bit of back and forth right now in terms of adding the modules, seeing what these numbers are, maybe resizing the array to add more, or try using a different part of the roof, or maybe even reduce that system size. So one of the things that I'll show, and again, this is kind of in beta right now, so a lot of you won't have access to this, but you'll expect to see it early next year, is what we call a smart designer. So rather than you choosing where you want to put the modules and kind of trialing, erroring until you arrive at the desired offset, we can go to the smart designer, and here you've got three options. So you can start by max fitting the roof. It's just one click, it will just place modules on all facets. Some people will actually go into their appointments with a max fit design and then kind of remove modules as per the discussion with the homeowner. But what you could do, as I say, is just come in here, and you can also now design a system that's optimized to reduce the homeowner's bill, or a system that's designed to achieve a specific consumption offset. So if we take that second option for now, I'm going to tell the tool that I want 105% consumption offset. This is the hardware I want to use. I hit proceed. And from there, what Solargraf will actually do is it will max fit the roof, and then it will periodically remove modules one by one until it achieves the target consumption offset. So it's obviously going to remove the modules that produce the least first, and it's going to keep the modules that produce the most to achieve that offset. So we'll just let it do the maths. It takes a little moment. Just keep in mind there's a bit of a delay, guys, because I'm sharing my screen as well. It'll probably be a bit quicker for you. So based on our 105% consumption offset, the software has selected this south-facing facet as the best place to put modules, and then it's used this top corner of that east-facing facet as well, right up to the obstruction. So in terms of aesthetics, this may not be exactly what you actually want to install for the homeowner, but it does give you a sense of kind of what's the minimum system size and where might be the best place to put those modules to achieve that offset that we had that we requested. So we can do that with 22 modules in this example. And that will give us the ROI, 8.9%. That pays off in 11 years. And it gives us the net savings and the utility bill offset down here as well. Now, of course, all these values will depend on your pricing for PV, as well as what kind of escalation rate you've assumed for the utility prices as well. So a lot of variables here. This is a demo account, guys. You can't take all these numbers necessarily at face value, but it gives you a sense of how it might work once you've configured your settings. So as I say, I'm going to try and remove these modules off the south facing facet. Maybe we could pretend the homeowner said to avoid that, and then from there, as I say, really we know that this is the facet that we want to use. I'm just going to go back to sort of the layout that I had earlier. So I think we'll stick with portrait. I forget exactly how many modules we had on there, but something like this is probably about right. So that's kind of, I would say, more or less the A to Z of tracing the roof, rendering it in 3D, and then placing the modules. Whether you do that manually or in the near future running the Smart Designer. I do just want to quickly jump over to another address that I have prepared. Oh, my screen's gone blank. Let's hope that you guys can still see that. So this is another address I've prepared. This is in NEM 3.0 territory. So just wanted to walk briefly through how the Smart Designer behaves there as well, especially with batteries. So again, into Solar Design, we've already got a happy 3D model. We're good with that. So then from there, run the Smart Designer. This time I'm going to optimize that system to reduce the bill. So from there, again, we'll be asked for a target bill offset. As I say, it's pretty much useless trying to target 100% offset. You probably won't get there. Somewhere in the 80 to 90% range is usually pretty recommended, pretty realistic. So I'll put that at 85. Again, I'll use the same hardware. It doesn't really matter, but this time I'm going to add a battery. So I know that will help me to reduce the bill in this part of California. So we'll hit proceed, and then again, it will run the same algorithm, max fit the roof, remove the modules one by one, starting with those that produce the least, or actually that produce the least at the wrong time, if you know what I mean. Obviously, in NEM 3.0, sometimes it's better for us to have modules that produce later in the day, if we don't have a battery anyway. And then, as I say, it will also come up with a battery recommendation that will help us to achieve that target 85% bill offset. So as I say, it won't blindly keep adding modules just to achieve that 85%. If it realizes that it can achieve 84% with a relatively small system, it won't double the size of that system just to achieve 85%. But it will aim for as close as reasonably possible to that target bill offset that you'd entered. So here, because we'd asked the tool to use the battery as well, you'll see kind of two components to this menu, right? So your solar only, 7.2 kilowatts, that's offsetting 51% of the bill. It's going to result in savings of 77,000 over the course of a 25-year project, and we've got an ROI and a payback up there. Now below, we see the same PV system, but with 3 5Ps added. So there you see we can achieve 86% bill offset. So it's slightly over the 85% that we asked for, but that's obviously because we can't add half a battery, right? And that's going to give us significantly more net savings over 25 years. And again, we'll see our ROI and our payback. So the payback is slightly longer with the battery, but keep in mind, there's most of the savings that are occurring are going to be kind of later on in that 25-year period. So even though we've got a slightly longer payback, it doesn't mean that the homeowner is not better off going with those batteries. So if you're happy with that recommendation, you can just hit that add battery button, and that will add the 3 5Ps to this design. If you want to, you can keep this design as PV only, and you can basically clone that PV only design and then add the batteries. So if I hit this checkbox, now we'll actually have kind of 2 designs for the customer. One that's PV only, and then the same PV system with the batteries. And that's going to be really useful, I think, if you're presenting to a homeowner and they're asking about why the battery is important. You can actually show side by side what those numbers look like with and without the battery. So that, again, that's just a quick demo on, as I say, the Smart Designer, both with and without a battery. If we come back to our project over in Florida, I do just want to run through quickly the battery design tool itself, because there's quite a lot that's going on there. So if we've got PV on the roof, we've got estimated production, we're happy with that. So we move into battery design. And here, I mean, it really depends on kind of the use case for the homeowner, but I'll just walk you through briefly what the kind of inputs are in terms of recommending, a battery system. So first off, you'll have to select a manufacturer. You can see, actually, I'll keep that menu open for a moment. You can see there's a pretty exhaustive list of hardware manufacturers that we support. Obviously, you're all going to sell Enphase, but those are there if ever you need them. And then obviously, if that manufacturer has multiple product groups or ranges, you have to select which of those you intend to sell. So let's say it's the 5Ps. We'll make this grid tied. So we're not actually, I'll tell you what, we won't for now. And then we'll need to choose our battery mode. So, you may want to prioritize the savings, which, as I say, is generally going to be the case in California. Somewhere like this in Florida, it may be that backup is more the kind of primary driver for getting a battery. So I'll just run through that scenario. And let's just say this person wants to be backed up for 12 hours. We can actually come in here and see what the different appliances are in the home and which of those need to be backed up. So obviously, if you say that you want the air conditioner backed up, there's a whole host of assumptions here around the operating power, LRA, days, hours of daily usage. You can edit those, but those are just there to display initially. If we say we want that air conditioner backed up, obviously that's going to increase the recommendation in terms of battery size. So once you ask for a recommendation, you'll see the factors that we're considering here. So obviously the energy, how much energy do we need to power those appliances for that period of time in the case of a grid outage, backup power, and then also the surge power as well. So each of those factors will translate into a certain number of batteries that are needed to satisfy that factor. So even though based on power, backup power and surge power, we only need 2 5Ps to actually kind of get those appliances running, we will need a third 5P because we want them to be running for 12 hours. So that's where the recommendation comes from. You can either use that recommendation or you can select, a new configuration, let's say, of 5Ps. If you want to start with something a little bit smaller, I'll just stick with the recommendation for now. So this last bit is really kind of how you would arrive at a recommendation for batteries, through the UI by providing specific needs. What's your kind of your main goal, specifically how long do you want to be backed up for, or what kind of self-consumption value are you targeting? And as I say, once you plug those in, the tool will recommend batteries for you. Obviously, if you're running the Smart Designer, as we did over here in California, you can pretty much skip that battery design step because you've already added the batteries over here. So just a note, whenever we've selected this option to create a clone, over up here in the main kind of navigation bar, you'll see that there's now 2 designs. So we've got option 1. I can rename that. I'll just call it, bear with me, I'll call it PV only. And we've also got a second option down here, which was the clone. And I'm going to rename that as PV with 15 kilowatt hours of storage. So you can rename that from this menu. You can go back to the overview and rename it over here where you're managing your options. Obviously, you can choose which of those you want to show to the customer. You may want to have a few in your back pocket, but only go into the appointment with 1 or 2 potential designs or options shown to the customer. So it is good practice to try and create a few different scenarios, either small system, larger system, one with a battery, one without. Try and be creative and anticipate what the customer's going to ask for, and then that way you're doing less work when you're actually in front of them presenting the quote. So I'm a little bit hesitant on time, so I'm just going to quickly run through what a quote might look like. Again, mostly for the benefit of people that haven't used Solargraf before or haven't used it in a little while. But the basic concept of the proposal, guys, is you've got a web version and a PDF version. So the PDF is just a snapshot of the web version. The web version is kind of a living document. You can make changes to this in real time, with or without the customer present. Further, I want to start by saying that the web quote is broken out into sections. So you can customize this in your settings that affects all projects, or you can customize it on a per project basis. We're looking at it on a specific quote, but all these things can be customized from settings ahead of time. So you don't have to do this each time. But basically, there's a bunch of kind of boilerplate, example sections that we'll give to you as part of your Solargraf account. So you'll have a design section, you'll talk about pricing, materials, estimated savings, whatever. You can also have an about us section. I don't have one configured on this account, unfortunately, but that's where you might talk about your company, your history, what makes you special. You can showcase your previous projects if you want to do that for the customer. And for each of these sections, you can choose, obviously, if you want to show or hide them. You may not want to talk about materials on the quote, for example. I would imagine most people do, but it's not mandatory. And you can also reorder these as well. So you can kind of tell that story in whatever order you want. I'm going to start with design, but some people might want to put pricing at the end or start with pricing. You've got the flexibility to show or hide various sections as well as order those. And then if I just run through really, really quick, obviously you've got your available options up here, so you can switch between the PV only or the one with the storage. You can switch between various financing scenarios. I've got cash selected by default, but we could have, let's say, loans or leases, PPAs, etc. And then basically, you've got this header. You can have your own image, your own logo, or your contact details. You can show the 3D design on the quote. So this is a really nice way to kind of impress the customer and just show how you've modeled their home. You can pick and choose what kind of data shows here. If you want to put the CEC-AC rating rather than the AC rated power output, you can kind of pick and choose there. We'll walk through the price, the financing scenario. So obviously if it's cash, it's just going to compare old and new bill. If it's a loan, it's going to have some different data in terms of what's being borrowed at what rate over what period of time. Pricing. If I actually switch to my my second option that has the batteries, we'll see itemized pricing for solar, for storage. You can have any number of adders as well, guys. You don't have to call them out as explicit line items on the quote. You can kind of have them hidden, things like sales commissions or whatever. You can support things like energy saving products. So if you've got, some kind of insulation that you're going to put in their roof and that's going to reduce their consumption, you can create that as an adder with its own price. You can model how that will actually reduce their consumption in the future. So this is an example. Obviously, all the incentives will be written in. You can manage those from your settings menu up here. We've got something for incentives. Yes, we do. Materials, you'll have an image, spec sheets. You can have videos here if you want. Just talk through kind of the main hardware products that you'll be selling. We can look through the usage breakdown. So for this one, I think it's particularly pertinent. Let's go to September for this California project. And here you'll see very high battery discharge in those evening hours. So, I'm aware that there was some news that came out last week in terms of, how homeowners will be compensated in California that might have some implications on how we show this chart. But the current version is developed prior to that news. So for today, we're showing your production, which obviously goes up and down with the sun, consumption, which is that same 2-peak graph we saw when we started, and then here you can show where the grid import will occur and also where the battery discharge will occur as well. So very nice graph that kind of shows visually to the homeowner how both the PV and the battery will behave. We can also talk a bit about savings as well. So this is kind of like a cost of doing nothing chart. You can see obviously the red bar chart is the current bill. You can see that increase. We do call out what escalation rate we've used as well. Obviously, the blue bar here starts low and stays relatively low. This is for a cash deal. If we were looking at a loan, you'd see the same thing, but with those loan repayments, or if it's a lease, you'd see the kind of monthly lease payments there as well. So really kind of just helps to demonstrate to the homeowner, what their payments are going to look like in the future. Project timeline, I won't spend too much more on this section, but this is a really good way to just explain to the homeowner what's involved. You don't have to put these dates here if you don't want. They're kind of intended as provisional dates. You can call out when certain payments are due if it's a cash deal. Just really helps to get their mind into the mode of sort of what's going to happen, how long is it going to take, what's required from me, etc. There's a bit more content here around the benefits of solar, environmental impacts, increasing the value of the property. Same for the battery. Again, you can show and hide those. You can create your own versions of those should you wish. And then the quote does also allow you to preview your terms and conditions. You can have multiple templates for those. Homeowner can actually e-sign and accept the offer. Obviously, we do have DocuSign integrated as well for a legally binding contract. So a lot of people are now kind of removing this signature from their quotes and just showing it as a kind of informational document, and then issuing a contract when they get that go ahead from the customer. So again, didn't want to race through that too much. I'm sure most of you have seen it before, but just calling it out for those that weren't aware how easily you can generate a quote based off that 3D design. So yeah, I think I've probably spoken enough there, Hisham. Do we want to jump to a Q&A or anything else we want to finish up with?
Yeah, sure. Let's I think we've covered everything. If we want to go ahead and start with the Q&A session, there is a few questions, George, that I'd like to start with that I've basically assigned to you. I'm going to read them off and read the partner's name. Just give me 1 second. So I have a question from Jeremy here. In regard to illustrating the batteries in the design, is it possible to add a feature to unstack multiple batteries? We're finding that Tesla Powerwalls cannot be stacked anymore. In all of the AHJs we sell in. And when the tool here stacks those batteries in the proposal, it gives false hope and is not permitted in the actual design of the build. Can we have the option to unstack the batteries in the illustration on the proposal for Powerwalls specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it's the first I've heard of that, Jeremy. So I appreciate you raising it. We'll be sure to get working on a feature that I guess allows you to customize how those batteries are displayed. I know, at the moment we're kind of showing these on a kind of a stock image, which is either an outdoor or an indoor wall. I know on the roadmap we are looking to allow you to take a picture of your customer's wall and actually superimpose that battery hardware on their wall, just to make things look a bit more realistic on the quote. So I think as part of that effort, we would allow you to unstack or stack the batteries as per the AHJ. So certainly on the roadmap. Appreciate the question.
All right, thanks, George. I'll go ahead with the next one. The question from Corey. Is it possible to eliminate the load breakdown and just use whole home backup as a general toggle?
Sorry, Hisham, my line broke a bit. Could you repeat that one more time, please?
Sure. So the question from Corey is it possible to eliminate the load breakdown and just use whole home backup as a general toggle?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we could do. Yeah, I think we just need to add a little button there that just basically toggles everything to be true. Again, I think today you would have to open up that that page we show with the full list of appliances and toggle each of them one by one. But we'll certainly look to smoothen that out for you, just to add a little toggle that says back out all appliances.
All right, great. Another question on the battery. Will the battery show backup by month on the proposal? I'm not sure if you covered that, George. You were going through the proposal.
No, I don't.
George, you broke up there for a second. All right, I'll come back to that question once George is back online. Um, let's see. All right. So I'll take the questions that I can take until George joins back. So what's the accuracy of the 3D model? Very good question. So now our shading numbers are um, verified and approved by NYSERDA and NREL. So, and we are also working on a bankability report from a third party. So we're trying to get all the angles to approve our production numbers. So with the outer roof detection as well, that's going to help improve the 3D model detection. But in most cases and in most addresses that we ran across different states, we are able to generate a pretty accurate 3D model that would result in actual accurate production when you place the panels on the roof. All right. Other one I can take. Can you run cash and finance modeling on single proposal? Yes. So the nice thing about our proposal files, the customer can actually toggle between a cash option and a finance and a loan option on the proposal itself. And you can also show 3 different options to a customer on one file. So that means you're selling a PV system and then you're showing a benefit of a PV plus a battery, a PV plus 2 batteries. So you can show 3 options at a time. Each option would include a cash and a loan option. George, maybe you want to reiterate a little bit more on the accuracy of the 3D model. So there's a question from Henry here. What is the accuracy of the 3D model? So I talked about NYSERDA and I talked about NREL. Is there anything you want to add on the level of accuracy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I say, yeah, we are certified by NREL and NYSERDA now. So what they've basically said is that provided you have an accurate 3D model, the shading numbers can be trusted. You know, they're within, I think, 2% of data taken with a sol metric, I think. On the 3D model itself, I mean, generally it comes down to the quality of the image. You know, as we saw in the demo, it's worth taking some time to make sure you have a decent aerial image. If you don't, it can get a bit, you know, there are potential issues. If you've got a good image and you follow the steps that we've shown today, you know, the measurements are going to be accurate to the pixel. Pitch and azimuth, generally good. You know, always worth double checking the azimuth values, but, you know, we're using LiDAR data here. So generally the pitch has, you know, been proven to be accurate. And then obviously one of the things, you know, you can see we're working towards the roof detection to actually detect the roof outline. You know, as we see, it's, you know, it's still in beta. It's a new feature, a new algorithm that's still learning. But the hope is that, you know, into 2024, that algorithm should improve to be, you know, very accurate at scale. And, you know, if that's the case, then we're essentially removing a lot of the human error that can occur with 3D modeling. So the idea is really to drive it towards the point where ultimately you'll be on that pre-design page we looked at earlier and you'll be punching in all your consumption data and we'll be running those algorithms in the background. So you'll actually just land in the design tool with the roof already detected, already rendered in 3D. Of course, it's always good to have a human eye do a bit of QA on that. But ultimately, that's kind of, you know, where we expect to be sometime in next year.
All right, great. Another question from Corey. DocuSign integration, is it possible to have the ability to add a text box? It currently only allows for checkboxes, initials, and signatures. So yes, you do have 2 options when you model contracts in Solargraf. So you can either have your own standard terms and conditions, where the homeowner is only able to check the box and sign the proposal. And now you have access to DocuSign. So if you do have a DocuSign link, you can integrate your DocuSign account with Solargraf, and you can actually set up your own templates with custom placeholders. There is a video on the support page, Corey, if you're currently using Solargraf, that tells you how you can set up your DocuSign. Okay, keep going. What benefits do in-phase installers receive in using the design tool, both on pricing for a subscription or any integration with the broader tools we have access to in Lighting Manager? So yes, depending on what category of an in-phase installer you are, we do have specific discount that we give to in-phase installers. And that can be discussed, Taco, with one of the sales reps prior to the meeting. And then in terms of integrations, So you can currently access, if you have an active Solargraf subscription and you're on an active plan, you can currently access the design tool from Enlighten Manager. Of course, we're looking into various integrations to do with Enlighten Manager, Solar Lead Factory, the whole DBU division, digital business unit, and have one standard flow that's kind of integrated all into Solargraf. But to answer your question in short, yes, we do give special pricing to Enphase installers, and yes, you can access Solargraf from Enlighten Manager.
Yeah, I'll just touch a bit more on that as well. Actually, on the integration with Enlighten Manager, it's still fairly nascent, I would say, that integration. I mean, some of you'll be aware, Solargraf sort of became part of the Enphase family in the last couple of years, so we're still kind of working through that integration. But I know we are looking to kind of automate the site creation in Enlighten based on Solargraf data. So, sometime in the near future, doing work in Solargraf in terms of design and so on will actually save you time in Enlighten later on.
Thanks, George. All right, we've got another few more minutes to go. Any more questions? There's one question here, George, maybe you can help me with that one. From Eric, I thought I saw the various roof areas were shown in the different colors on the 2D initial view. I assume showing degrees of solar radiation depending on direction to south. Is that a new feature? I hope that would be a great feature, as some house images are very difficult to see direction of the individual roof sections.
Yeah, so sorry, I think if I understand, I mean, basically we need to render the roof in 3D to assess the shade. So things like the pitch of the roof, the height of a facet relative to neighboring facets, if there's a vertical wall between them, all those things need to be computed before we know exactly what the shading values would be on each part of the roof. So, I mean, is it a new feature? Obviously, it's been part of the 3D design tool since the beginning. The 3D design tool itself is fairly new, so I guess in that sense, it is a new feature. Happy to connect offline, Eric, if you want to talk through it a bit more. Maybe I'll understand a bit more sort of how much you've used Solargraf today and dig a bit deeper on that question.
Okay. One question I missed, and I know, Brian, I apologize, you posted again. Anything for VPP calcs for HO considering battery for VPP?
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, so we're actually talking to the grid services team at Enphase at the moment about integrating or modeling a lot of the VPP calculations as part of our incentives module. Don't think there's anything up and running today, but that is a priority. I suspect you'll see something for that in Q1 or Q2 of next year.
Okay. Corey has a question. What is the best way to request changes to Solargraf? So that's a really good question, Corey. On the support page, you do have an option to submit a user voice request. And what happens with that is it lines up into our queues. And based on the votes we get, this is how we prioritize features. Now, if this feature you feel is a deal blocker for you or a big challenge, you can always escalate to your account manager. You will find your account manager's name in your account, and you can just simply email Solargraf accounts to connect with your account manager. But that would be the fastest and the easiest ways to submit a user voice request, which you can access from the support page. Okay, another question from Corey. Okay, and we're glad that you're enjoying your experience with Solargraf, Corey, and we promise that you're continuously going to see different new improvements to the platform. So the upcoming one, somebody posted a question about, Taco, what do we have on our rollout that we're excited about? So we're about to release the new UI, which you don't see on your account today, but you will see pretty soon in a few days. So it's a fresh look of Solargraf UI. Everything stays the same. The user experience stays the same. It's just a fresh look to the UI. The big ones we're working on is permit automation, where you'll be able to generate the single line diagram or generate a self-service permit directly from Solargraf. Outer roof detection. What else, George, we've got there? Smart Designer, that George went through. So those are the big features we're kind of excited about, and we're constantly making improvements to the endpoints that we support on for API.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, as I say, I mean, obviously on the design tool side, it's all about automation. So improving, tweaking that roof detection algorithm, tweaking the wizard, making it work, 1% more every day. Permitting is going to be huge. There's going to be a lot of focus. You'll probably see a webinar like this coming on that before long. And the API as well, that's a fairly new feature for us, and it's been very much top of mind for installers. So that's something that's just going to keep growing over the next year or so.
Yep. Excellent. One more question from Rodney. How about battery life expectation on these type of systems in areas where with increased rates based on hours of the day?
Yeah, so I mean, we typically model the battery according to the warranty. So there is an ability for you to, when you add a battery to a Solargraf quote, there is an ability for you to model what the battery replacement cost would be. So after X years, and then as a percentage of the original cost. And then in terms of the performance of the battery, I would need to check with colleagues if we have any kind of degradation factor applied. I'm minded to say no, but that's something I will follow up with my colleagues, and we'll get back to you on that one.
I know we support the degradation of the system panels.
The modules, yeah. The batteries, I don't know if we have a factor for that. So yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to check.
Okay. Great. Other questions? We're a little bit past time, but we can extend for another minute or two if anybody has more questions. Great. So you're all going to receive a recording, an email with a recording of today's session. And also, as to appreciate you guys taking the time to join this webinar, we're going to give you a free run on Solargraf. So you will get email credentials. You will be contacted by an agent to help you get set up. And then we'll give you a special incentive or a bonus for the holiday season if you guys decide to subscribe to the plan. So stay tuned today or tomorrow. You should be getting an email in your inbox with all the instructions. All right, great. So that concludes our session. Thank you, George. Great demo. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day, and enjoy your Christmas holiday upcoming. Take care, everyone.
Thanks very much, guys. All the best. See you soon.